My goodness.
Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm gonna let you say
Let's go, hey.
got me started. Wrist frames carded. Pull up double parking. Don't even pay like I'm the owner. My young niggas retarded.
Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. It's Caleb back again with Julian, and we are joined today by Steve Pelletier. I never get the pronunciation.
It's either Pelletier or Pelletier, like if you want to be
Pelletier?
fancy,
Okay.
the correct pronunciation.
I'll
But I
do
always
the
say Pelletier.
Pelletier.
I like
That's
Pelletier.
fine. How you doing, Steve? It's good to talk to you again. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been about a couple months, I think, since I was last on and since we last talked. So it's good. I've just been diving into a ton of freshman film mainly. My podcast, RezBall Pod, I just released a podcast called the Matt Penny Special, where I dig deep into the freshman class to try and find prospects who are not ranked in the RSCI top 50 and say, okay, let's try and find one of these guys by the end of the process that is going to be picked probably in the first round, because there's always a couple guys that emerge like that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I mean, we're not unfamiliar to trying to cover the lower end of the recruiting class, and this class is a good one to really make some good calls on, because there's a lot of undiscovered and underrated talent, and I've already seen throughout my process. It's just this year's ranking is kind of interesting. I just think that there's a lot of talent. There's a good top 100 guys, and then there's like an exceptional amount of talent lower and then crazy transfer portal, and I think it all has great implications here in this conference that we're going to be talking about. Julian, how we feeling today? Rock chalk restock. Love the fit. He's really committed, Steve, to this doing a fit themed now to every episode, and I'm loving it.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, I like it too, man. You got to bring that style.
Gotta look fresh. I mean, to be honest, I didn't quite have as much time to delve into the Big 12 as I would have liked. But I'm still very, very excited about it. I'm just intrigued by how the new teams do this year more than anything else. But I mean, like, no matter what, in any given year, the Big 12 is always like 4 or 5. I mean, for the most part, I don't want to say always, that's too general, but for the most part, it's at least 4 or 5 teams deep, sometimes 6 or 7 teams deep in a really good year. And now that they've added a few like legit basketball schools into the conference, it's even deeper. And I'm excited, man. I cannot wait to see Houston and Big 12 play.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I guess we'll open with talking about the teams that were added, because we are not prone to errors. Nobody's perfect. We may or may not have put BYU in the episode with Tyler Rucker on the WCC and the Pac-12, which is okay. I mean, we still covered.
Oh, bro, I didn't realize they were there until you told me that too. And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot the conference realignment already started.
Yeah, I
and
forgot.
Here in Arizona,
UCF
we're gearing up to be in the Big 12 next year, but I'm still going to forget, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to forget until they start playing against teams in that conference. I'm like, wait, why are they playing in January? Is this an out-of-conference game?
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting. I think the guys that we should still talk about for BYU, I mean, with you, Steve, is we really like Ali Khalifa, and I'm a big fan of Marcus Adams Jr. And I was curious if you had any thing to say about Marcus Adams Jr. Kind of bounced around a little bit in the preseason, to say the least, but good player nonetheless, good athlete. I like his game.
Yeah, no, the only player on BYU that I really could say anything confidently about is Traore. Husseini, just like their rock there, and definitely old school, big. Other than him, I think everybody else I don't know quite yet. And really, this will be a great year in the Big 12 to see who's going to separate and who's going to really stand out there. But Traore is the only one that I'm like, yeah, I feel confident in. Everybody else to me is more of like a wait and see approach.
Yeah, he's a great player. I'm not the highest on him in terms of like draft prospect lens, but
he's probably mostly like a college big who dominates and awesome, but in the league, unless he magically starts shooting threes in a high clip at a high percentage, it's gonna be tough.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Have you watched much Ali Khalifa? He was played for Charlotte last year, and he's got a good game. I think I don't know, Julian. I guess we could have a different conversation with him framed. And I was thinking about it. How good is he going to be in the Big 12? I mean, we both were really high on him being a guy in the WCC.
Look, I don't know. It kind of changes my thinking on him a little bit, especially with the defensive stuff. I mean, there are some talented big men. I mean, there were just kind of like big dudes in the WCC. Like they had guys who were 7 feet tall, not the most like skilled guys in the world. But in the Big 12, you have like your Hunter Dickinson, your like, oh my God, he was Texas's big man. I'm totally like, oh, Caden Shedrick just transferred into the conference. Jesse Edwards is really talented as well. Like there are legitimate big men in the Big 12. And I love Ali Khalifa as a guy who can kind of move the ball around, like make things easier for the rest of the guys on the offense. I am a bit more concerned with how he's going to hold up defensively this year, especially down low. I love his mobility and I love his ability to kind of like get out to the perimeter and stuff like that. But like, can he bang down low with any of the guys that I just named? I don't think so. And I think, I'm a bit less excited about him now. And it sucks, man. I love Ali Khalifa, but it's going to be a tough year for him defensively.
Yeah. I mean, if you aren't familiar with his game, Steve, I guess we could kind of sub it up as he's kind of just.
Well, yeah, he's a stretch big. He's a good passer. I think he pairs well with Traore, but I just don't know how much shine and how much usage he's going to get there. I think as long as you keep him away from center, what Julian's talking about won't be as big of a thing. But again, the shooting, I'm like, how much is he going to shoot? Are they just going to let him fire away? My gut says no, because it's BYU and they don't play like that. So that's the concern. I wish he was playing for Utah State. If he was going to play in like any Utah team, then he would have fit in perfectly there, where they do say, fire away from three.
I still am curious about the post game, but I think it'll get kind of covered up and stuffed by a lot of the prominent defensive big men that are already in the Big 12. So it'll be interesting. It's kind of a bummer, and I wanted to reframe that convo with you, Julian, but it is what it is. Moving on to bigger and better things within the conference. What are our thoughts about the other three teams entering? All from the AAC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they are all from the AAC.
So Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF, Central Florida.
It's a weird one, man.
Any of them stick out to you guys? I mean, obviously Houston's been great. The last really under Calvin Sampson, they've been terrific year to year. But what does that look like now in the Big 12? Are we expecting the same type of success?
I am. I think every other team in the Big 12 is like, we don't want to play these guys because of the different looks they can give. They're not like a traditional center type of team. They pretty much have never been that way. The way their guards tack, the way they can hit you with a bunch of different dudes every single game. I mean, Sasser and Grimes are probably like two of the ones that are kind of the exception. Otherwise, it's like four dudes that can space or four dudes that can attack, and you never know who's going to be able to hit you. And then defense, their ability to just switch, their ability to get out and attack and be aggressive while also stay disciplined. Again, I think that's the team that's going to give Kansas fits, because I'm a U of M guy. That's where I got my PhD from. I spent all my time the last couple of years watching Juwan Howard and watching Hunter Dickinson. He does not want to move out of the paint, either on offense or defense. And Houston's one of those teams that will get him out of there and out of his comfort zone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The Hunter Dickinson take. I'll be curious to see how he does. You guys picked him to still be the player of the year, so I'll be curious to see. But Julian, what are you thinking? Do you like any of these teams in particular?
Yeah, I mean, Steve touched on it. Like, Houston does things that carry over when you're talking about the floor spacing and the defense. The other thing that I want to touch on is they are a tenacious rebounding team. And I think if you're a team that's transferring conference to conference and you kind of just like tend to be good because you bring in a good player or two here or there, which no offense to Cincinnati and UCF, but that's kind of been a bit more of the mold, is when the talent's been there, those two teams have been there. Whereas Houston, it's very much like Kelvin Sampson has his culture. It doesn't matter if you're a 5-star recruit like Jarris Walker. or if you're a regular, 4 3-star recruit like Terrence Arsenault, you're going to play the way that Calvin Sampson wants to play, which is space the floor, play really good defense. You have to be able to play good defense, or you're not going to get it on the court. And it's a team effort on the boards. And it's not going to be fun for a lot of these Big 12 teams to play against Houston. It's very, very different from pretty much anyone other than Texas Tech in that conference. I know West Virginia usually kind of does their weird pressy stuff, but I don't know how much, the new hire at West Virginia is going to be taking care of all of that. So yeah, it's just another team that you don't want to play. And Cincinnati and UCF, I think we'll see. I know they have a couple of guys that we really like over there, but I think they're going to struggle this year, especially UCF. Cincy, if Racking can get going and Jizzle James can come in and play well, I think they could maybe make a little bit of noise. But Houston goes deep in the tournament all the time. Houston's a perennial one. Like, there's no question to me that Houston's going to be just fine in the Big 12.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I think Central Florida and Cincinnati need to have a lot more things go right. Pretty much the same thing with BYU than Houston, obviously, for them to be contenders. Kind of moving on to the rest of the conference, some of the players that we mentioned and a specific name that we mentioned, I referenced before, is Kansas. We all had them as the team to beat in the Big 12. What are we thinking about the Hunter Dickinson addition and some of the other pieces that they have going in next year? A lot of people are high on Furphy, but I really like Kevin McCullough Jr., and it's good to see him play another year of college basketball. What do you think about Kansas, Steve?
Is it I don't know how to say this other than I like the addition of Hunter Dickinson, but I don't know how much better it makes them because they did so much switching last year. I really like KJ Adams. I really like the way that they played with him at center. It was him and Ernest Uday really taking up all the big man minutes, and it gave them a different look because Jalen Wilson crashed the glass, McCullough crashed the glass, even Grady Dick crashed the glass along with KJ Adams. It was those four guys, and then when one of those three, Jalen Wilson, Grady Dick, or Kevin McCullough got it, they all were able to attack and get out in transition. I mean, it's how they messed up so many different people. That's gone now. You can't do that with Hunter anymore. You got to slow down, and it's going to be more traditional Kansas offense. But at the same time, I mean, that's how they've won so many national titles. Bill Self may be the best coach in all of college basketball as well. He will always figure it out. Hunter started to extend his range as well, too. That could be another thing that they will throw in there. And then he does have the guys around him that can cover up for him. KJ is more mobile, switch defender there. Doesn't take threes, but again, if Hunter's going to space out, then he's got that covered. And it's also Bill Self in Kansas. They don't necessarily need to take a ton of threes. DeJuan Harris is back. Kevin McCullough's back. And then we'll see the other freshman that emerges. That's the part of it that I'm like, I don't know. This is probably the first Kansas team in a while where I don't really like any of the freshmen. I'm not a Furphy guy. He's okay. I know a lot of people like Marco Jackson, but like, I don't see where he fits in, like in this rotation. And if he does, he just has to be jacking up shots. So yeah, it's like I said, I like that they added Hunter. I know it'll still translate to wins, but I don't know if it will get them further than what they've got before.
That's that's completely valid. I agree with a lot of your points there. I think that you mentioned some good things with the Hunter Dickinson edition, kind of bringing them back to a more traditional style, where last year they were more successful kind of when they sped things up. I still like their defensive depth, and I'm curious what you think, Julian, but I think that if they run a lineup out there of Harris, McCullough, Adams, Dickinson, and like Jackson mixed in with like as a smaller unit, or Furphy mixed in with a bigger unit, I still think they have a lot of potential to get some decent shooting with Furphy on the floor. Kevin McCullough's not a slouch from 3-point range. I still think they have some spots where they definitely could be exposed on offense, but defensively, I still like their upside with those two wings. I mean, with Adams and McCullough, you can do still a lot of that switching. Harris is more than comfortable. Me and Tyler Metcalf talked about it, and one of the things that he just raved about Harris was his ability as a smaller guard to really take on some tougher matchups at like towards the wing position. So, what are you thinking, Julian of Kansas? Sorry.
Look, I'm pretty much with Steve on this. Like, I just don't think that teams who are heavily reliant on a back to the basket center to generate that much of their offense are geared for March. I do want to say, like, I do think DeJuan Harris and like Kevin McCullough are two guys who are very much going to help them in March. But at the end of the day, like, what'd you bring Dickinson in for if not to put him at the center of the offense, right? So, I mean, we've seen it before with Drew Timme and Zach Edey. Just to name two off of my most recent memory that have been kind of like very similar to this. I know Timme tried to extend his game, but not really. And I just don't think that a team that, like, they're going to have trouble creating looks from three if Hunter Dickinson is struggling. And even if they can generate looks from three, McCullough's getting better, but he's still a bit shaky for me from deep. I know Harris can shoot. We'll see with the freshman. I like Marco Jackson. I think he's really, like, he's shifty. I like the way that he can pass. But I mean, like Steve said, I don't know that he's necessarily going to get that opportunity with the guys that they've got in front of him. So I don't know. Like, I think that they're a team that, like, could make the Sweet 16 in March. They'll probably be towards the top of the conference. Like, this doesn't seem like a Kansas national title challenge this year for me.
That's interesting. I think that these are the type of Kansas teams that we've seen in the past, where we kind of count them out early on because there's no talent that really pops. But I don't know. I think they have an interesting mix of returners and incoming freshmen. I think Marco Jackson, if he really pops as a prospect, they could be really, really good. I think that backcourt of Harris and Jackson, if he turns out like he looks, I mean, top 20 recruit per 24/7, and a lot of people like his game. Like you said, the playmaking's pretty solid for a freshman. I also think he's got some untapped shooting potential that we could see maybe at Kansas. So it'll be interesting. But the rest of the conference, are there any teams in particular that you like, Steve, that maybe has some players on here? I don't know how you feel about maybe like Texas or Kansas State.
We talking about in terms of like challenging for the top
Yeah,
spot?
yeah. I think those two come to mind as like the next two in line. Maybe Baylor, but I don't know how you guys are feeling about Baylor this year.
I like Baylor a lot, but again, they're really reliant on young guys, so I don't know if they're going to be able to push. Like, they need Jacoby Walter, Miro Little, or Yves Messi, one of the three, to basically emerge as the guy, or just for Ray J. Dennis to keep up, scoring 19 points per game, which is also something that could happen. But I think losing LJ Cryer is a little bit of a, like, oof.
And Flagler.
I don't know what happened there. That seemed like he should have been there to be the next in the line of like the Baylor guards that waited a while, and then they emerged in the last year. So they have to replace that. I like Jalen Bridges. I like Jonathan Chama Chachua. But again, they're not going to be scoring. You need one of these younger guys to step up. In terms of another team that could challenge Kansas, I mean, it's Texas. It's got to be Texas because their backcourt, they have the best backcourt in the Big 12 between Hunter and Asmus. Like, those guys just get buckets easily. And then they brought in Caden Shedrick, who, again, I'm surprised left Virginia to come here. He's going to be somebody that can challenge Hunter down low and frustrate him. And then they just got to figure out in between the forward spots. Dylan Mitchell maybe fires it up this year at the wing spot. We'll see. I do like Chris Johnson, though, in terms of like their freshman guys, because he does bring a different look than what Hunter and Asmus brings. He's more of like an attacker, more of kind of like a Rajon Rondo assist dude that will get everybody involved. Still emerging as a shooter, but it's them. And again, Kansas State, I think they were a nice story last year, but I have no idea who their backcourt is. And outside of Naquan Tomlin, I don't really feel confident in anybody else. Even Kaluma, who I think is okay, but I still don't know as a shooter. I still don't really buy into him as a primary guy. But Texas is probably going to be the team that does challenge Kansas at the end of the year.
Joanne, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Baylor, I know Steve was talking on, one of the guys from the freshman has to be the guy. I think it can be Jacoby Walter. I think he's talented. I think there's a lot of off the dribble shooting there that is really, really exciting. And I mean, I think there's a little bit of hesitancy just because Keontae didn't he had flashes where he looked great and kind of was like on and off for stretches, but I don't think he consistently popped in the way that people thought he would up there. I think the Crier thing is kind of funny because it's kind of just like a slap in the face that he went to the team that's coming directly into the Big 12 to challenge Baylor now. I honestly find that to be there must have been something behind the scenes there because that's a very like petty, sneaky kind of move. But I like it. I actually think like crazy as it might seem, I think Houston's probably the team that's closest in my opinion. Just because of their style of play. I really, really like Terrence Arsenal. He was my most improved player. I love the addition of LJ Crier. I do think they're losing a little bit of size. I know that oh my goodness, why am I blanking? They lost obviously Jarris. I can picture him, but I can't remember his name. It's okay. I know there's a big guy that Houston lost who was big on the boards for them. But I still think that, that backcourt of Abe Smith and Tyrese Hunter is very undersized, which is really interesting as well. They're going to score, don't get me wrong, but they might, if those two have off nights, it's going to be tough for that team defensively. I don't think I know Hunter's a beast on the defensive end, but I think Abe Smith is a little bit less so. So yeah, it's so tough, man. It really is because I think there are a lot of teams in this conference that have a lot of question marks, like that they're going to be good. It's a question of like, will they be good enough to unseat Kansas? And I just don't think the answer to that question is yes yet. I mean, like obviously we'll see, but it's much more of like a wait and see, and like we'll know at the end of the season that X, Y, and Z went right for some of these teams. But I don't think that there's a team that you can look at that's like, yeah, this team is like primed and ready to go. They have all the things in place that are necessary to beat a team like Kansas, especially with a guy who's, like Hunter Dickinson, who can be the best player in the conference, I don't know, man. It's tough. It's really tough.
You guys both named the two teams I kind of had in mind. I had Texas as kind of the one that stood out that could, if Dylan Mitchell makes just even a jump to be a more dominant defender at the least, him and Shedrick present a decent challenge that could hold up against a team like Kansas, and their backcourt you guys both mentioned are going to be able to score for them, things you're not asking from Shedrick or Mitchell. So I don't know, I think it's going to really just, we're gonna have to see how much depth Texas has. I think that's their biggest question, at least in my opinion. They brought in a Theo Horton from UCF who's solid, and
they did bring Disu back.
Yeah, so they do have some decent other guys returning in the front court. But Houston, for me, I think it'll be interesting just to see how much they hold up in the front court. I think, Javier Francis is a guy that I really like just in terms of his rebound, and I think that he'll get even more minutes with Walker gone. They didn't really bring in a premier front court talent with this recruiting class. They kind of did more repairing in the backcourt. They brought back Jamal Shedd, who I think is going to come back and have another great year for them. They're the team that I think was probably primed to beat Kansas, but some guys that I like challenging in the middle of that conference are two teams, Oklahoma State and Iowa State, are two teams that brought in some decent recruiting classes. And I'd be curious to see how they turn out in the next couple of years. But this year, is there anybody on these rosters, Steve, that maybe from a prospect or draft perspective could pop? There's a couple guys on Oklahoma State for sure that I want to talk about, but I was curious about some guys for you first.
Which teams was that?
Oklahoma State and Iowa State. Some of the younger guys.
Yeah, Omaha BYU is the one that I'm the most interested in, and honestly, like the only one that I really want to talk about just because of the size. I don't know the shot making. I was really excited about him going into the year, but then the FIBA U18s happened, and him and Cody Williams were the two that really disappointed me. They did not stand out at all. They still look like they're coming along in terms of their offensive package. Physically and defensively, I think he'll still hold up, but I don't know where the offense is quite yet. I want to sell him as a lottery pick, but again, I don't know what the jumper is. He'll definitely be in attack mode. His handle is fine. He's like 6'8", like 230-ish around there. I mean, like you just can't find guys this size that move like that. And he has multi-positional versatility. Like even if he doesn't shoot it well, he can still be a good four-man that plays defense. He could still do like pick and roll stuff if you wanted him to. But the money is in him being able to attack and either pass or shoot. We'll see. But I like the tools, and I would definitely still bet on him. He's probably like my Jordan Walsh for this year, because Jordan Walsh last year too, I was like, I don't really know like what your offense is going to be yet, but I buy into your hustle, I buy into your tools, I buy into your defense, and I buy into the work ethic that you're going to eventually turn it into something useful on the basketball court that will fit in somewhere between, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, something like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Bielu was the guy that I was hoping you would talk about. I picked him as kind of a dark horse, not necessarily going to unseat Hunter Dickinson, but I wanted to make sure that I wanted to emphasize that I think he really could be a breakout guy if things go right for him, especially with the rest of the squad that they have. He's going to get touches, like you mentioned, and it's going to be whether he is able to play make, do a little bit of everything, like kind of similar to a guy that we saw like Jarris Walker last year out of Houston. If he can do all the little things, he's going to be an interesting guy to bet on as a lottery pick, kind of like you mentioned. That's how I'm kind of hoping to look at him. There's some other guys on there that I really like. Milan Mamasilovic. I'm sorry, I just can't pronounce things today, but I'm normally pretty decent. But he is from Pewaukee, right over by me, like 15 minutes from my hometown, and I've kind of eyed a bit of his development. He's like 3 years younger than me, but I got to see him play as a freshman in high school, and he's just always been able to shoot the cover off the ball, and has some interesting skills with some good size, and he could be a perfect wing alongside Bielu, and I just think they're going to get the minutes early on, and then they brought in the 2 transfer guards. I think that they got some interesting things brewing, and I think that they'll be decent. I don't think they're anywhere near, even Kansas State's level next year in terms of where I'm at confidence-wise and them winning, but it's going to be a fun team to watch, I think, from a draft perspective going next year. Julian, what do you think about some of those guys for Iowa State?
Yeah, Iowa State's interesting just because they brought in a lot from the outside. The only guy that's the only really notable guys that they brought back where you got Taman. I almost said Taven. Taman Lipsey came back, and Demarion Watson came back, but pretty much everyone else, they just said, you know what, we're going all in. We're going to bring in as many freshmen as we can possibly get and transfer a couple of guys in and see what happens. And it's very experimental at Iowa State this year. I actually really like Lipsey. He kind of popped to me on film just as a, undersized guard who does a lot of hard work. He can shoot pretty decently. He's just like a fun player to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope he gets some minutes coming back as a sophomore. But I think the interesting difference that it's interesting you brought up Jarris, Caleb, because I think the big difference between Bielu and Jarris is Jarris was actually like limited in what he was allowed to do by Kelvin Sampson. I don't think Bielu was going to have like any sort of red light. Like if this kid shows them anything offensively, they're just going to like turn the keys over to him, to the Ferrari, and say, okay, like go drive us somewhere near March, please. And I think that like gives him a lot of upside and potential there, to vault up really, really quickly up draft boards, because like Jarris was up early and, kind of we knew that he could just do a bunch of different little things. But there was kind of this like, what can he really do offensively? We were kind of like, there was a little bit of like mystery around like how much offensive potential does he have? I think if Bielu has like legit offensive potential, we're going to see every ounce of it this year. And same with Momcilovic. They're going to give those two guys the green light. And I think that's what makes this Iowa State team so interesting, is because they brought so many guys in. You're going to see the talent quickly rise to the top and get the minutes because it's open season for those minutes, and that's always exciting. I kind of like teams like that because they're fun to watch early in the season because you can tell that the team is trying to figure out who they're gonna be playing, as the season goes on. You know, I don't think they're gonna win the Big 12, but I think that if their young guys show up, it's another, if X, Y, and Z go well, sure, why don't they, end up a 4 seed in March or something like that? Who knows?
Yeah, I love it. I think that they could be, like you said, really fun to watch just from the jump. And if Bielo gets the touches that, a guy like I kind of was saying that like similar to what Gigi Jackson was getting, but with a little bit more control. I don't know. It could be a kind of a perfect storm scenario for them. Another team that I really like, young talent wise, especially in the front court, is Oklahoma State. And I think that they also just have a solid returning team, and then brought in some surprisingly good recruits for them. Grabbing Jamron Keller, who I really like, and Justin McBride, who both have impressed me on film, to the young guys. Have you been able to watch either of them, Steve?
No, Oklahoma State's the one team that I really have not dove that much into, so I'm not going to be much help here. I just know every year they're always like the rock fight team, right? You look at the stats and you're never impressed, and like as an ugly game, but every year they're the team that like you barely beat by 2 or beats you by 3. It always comes down to the last shot. Really, the way the coaching staff has them play is always just tough. I really wish that Musa Cisse had stayed there for his last season. I don't like the transferring over to Ole Miss, and then Jamarian Sharp's there too. That seems like it's one of those guys is really going to regret transferring over there. But I really wish Musa Cisse had stayed there, man, because he was really good for them anyway.
Yeah, I think that bringing in Miranda and Daly Jr. though are gonna beef up that front court pretty well. I know, Julian, you at least like Daly. I've loved his stuff. Really good rebounder and gets after it. A great athlete and can shoot it a little bit.
Yeah, there's just another like 6'8" do-it-all guy who the big if is, can he shoot the three? Like how well can he shoot the three? Can he shoot it off the dribble? Can he, like is he a pure forward, or does he somehow turn into a point forward? Because all these 6'8" guys who can move have that potential. I think it's funny because like every few years Oklahoma State just seems to have like some guy that's just like ridiculously talented, whether it's Cade Cunningham or Marcus Smart, for like absolutely no reason. Like they're always like kind of like a middling team that ends up being an 8 or 9 seed in the tournament. Sometimes they make the NIT. And then like every like 5 years, you'll hear like some big name goes to Oklahoma State or some big name coming from Oklahoma State. And you're just like, what's going on here? Why do you guys not do this every year? I don't know. So yeah, I don't think they're gonna be that good, but
I mean, also alongside him in that front court, I'm surprised neither of you have tuned into some of the Miranda stuff and going back and looking at him. He didn't play at all for NC State last year, but top 50 recruit in his class, kind of just sitting out and getting that development. He looks like he put on some like decent amount of weight to his frame and looks like he could be pretty ridiculous. Just a really good athlete at that center spot, around the 100 spot as a transfer ranking. I mean, definitely still has the hype around his name. Not a guy who completely fall off, even though he did take the year off. I'll be interested to see how he can come in and if he can be an impact player right away. Because I don't know, Bryce Thompson coming back. Like I said, they brought in another guy, Brandon Garrison.
Yeah, I was just about to bring up Garrison because I was going to say he's the one why I'm like, I think if I had to pick one guy to bust out, it's him. I mean, double-double, average double-double as a senior, over 1 block per game, over 1 steal per game, 1.2 steals, 1.7 blocks, and then 3 assists. It's a nice combination of things. And anytime you're a center and you're over 1 steal and 1 block per game, that says you have multi-positional versatility. So he would be the one I'd keep an eye on, if anybody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really liked their whole recruiting class. I think them and Iowa State did some great team building. Even if none of these guys turns out to be one and done, if they can kind of maintain these teams, I mean, they're going to be interesting to teams to watch going forward. Kind of some underrated talent in that conference. I thought one thing that we should definitely give a lot of time to is kind of the transfer class coming in. and a guy on Iowa State that I really liked was Jackson Paveleski, and Keyshawn Gilbert, both transfers. I think they'll be interesting guards, just kind of, in more offensive guards, which is not something that we see a ton of in the Big 12. Tend to see some more defensive first and playmaking first guards. But both these guys are kind of geared to score the ball as well. So more guys for Iowa State that I like. What are we thinking about the rest of this transfer class? We kind of talked about some of the guys at the top, but have you gotten to watch Javian McCollum at all for Oklahoma, Steve?
Yeah, I watched a lot of JV and McCollum. I watched a lot of Ray J. Dennis. Those are the two that I know the most about. Both guys just hyper scorers. Why am I blanking on Oklahoma's lead scorer last year? He was another guard who just can.
Well, it was Groves, but I mean they also had
No, the guard. Sherfield, Grant Sherfield.
Oh yeah, Sherfield. My
Yeah,
bad.
I feel like JV McCollum just slides right into the Grant Sherfield role where he runs the offense and everything. I picked Milos Uzan to be the most improved player this year. I think he's going to do a lot of work there as well. So it's going to be a nice backcourt there for Porter Moser and that staff. But Ray J. Dennis, probably the one with the most pressure on him, again, because he's got to be the guy now at Baylor. He has to be the number one scorer. If not, that team either implodes or Miro Little and Jacoby Walter are like way better than what we expect. So it comes down to those two for me. Oh, and Davian McCollum coming to Oklahoma. I don't know how much that will transfer over into wins, but they do have a nice 3 combination there at the 1 with Javian McCollum, Milos Uzan at the 2, and then my pick for the freshman that's going to bust out and be like a Josh Green type of dude that nobody's talking about right now, but at the end of the year, probably is like a mid-first round, is Caden Cooper there at Oklahoma, which I don't know if you want to talk now, but we can circle back to later. So I think Javian McCollum fits in well there, but I think Ray J. Dennis is the one that, like, if everything goes well, then yeah, they're going to be one of the teams to beat and probably can knock off Kansas.
You can go with the Caden Cooper thing if you want, because I also talk about Otega Owe, and we can talk about Uzan a little bit.
Yeah, Caden Cooper, like I said, Josh Green, he profiles very similar to Josh Green. Josh Green was the 3rd leading scorer at Arizona in his one and done year. Another dude that going into the year, nobody really talked about. Both Caden Cooper and Josh Green are around 6'5", 200. Caden Cooper is listed at 6'5", 190 on Oklahoma's website. He's played alongside Jacoby Walter with Team Trae Young. He's played along other superstars at the Skills Factory, and he's continually been the 3-and-D type of guy where he does the dirty work, covers the toughest assignment, hits open shots, and is a very, very good athlete, like lob threat. There's nobody he can't hang with. He just profiles as the typical 3-and-D guy with a really good athleticism that every team wants. Like, the coaches are going to fall in love with him. His teammates will love him, and he's the type of wing that every team needs between their superstars. So I really like Caden Cooper and definitely think he's going to be the one freshman that ends up at the end of the year like, oh, we didn't think about this guy, but now he's a 1st-round pick.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to watch much Cooper, but I've heard good things about him. 3-and-D, that's really all much I've heard. And he'll be definitely on my radar now. Is that the guy that you were referring at the beginning? Is kind of your sleeper guy outside the top 50?
Yeah, like I said, the most recent pod I did, the Matt Penny special, he was my pick for that because he has the ability to do it. And again, he's not going to have all this pressure heaped on him to score and do all these other things because they have the Javian McCollum, Milos Uzan is already there. Those guys are going to handle the primary scoring, and he can slide in like Josh Green did behind Zeke Naji and Nico Mannion, who handled the scoring for Arizona, and Josh Green just handled all the dirty work, hit open shots, and did all these supplementary things while also being a good athlete. Caden Cooper is going to do that exact same thing.
Sweet. I'll definitely have to keep my eye on him a little bit more going forward. Me and Julian both talked a bunch about Otega Owe as a guy that I like also for them, who I think, didn't have the freshman year that I hoped he would have, but I think he'll still present some good upside as another backcourt guy for them. And they'll be fun to watch. Again, another one of these teams that has some good depth at certain spots, and it'll be interesting to see how John Hewley comes in from Pitt, if I'm not mistaken. He's a decent big man, so I don't know. They could have some talent. Again, I don't really see them contending, being more towards the middle. What do we think about the Jameer Nelson, Ernest Uday, newly led TCU, at least, and they also brought back major depth. I mean, I don't know, they could be interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to take up all the time here, so maybe Julian can go, but I have major thoughts on TCU for sure.
Okay, Julian.
I
This was
mean,
kind of the transfer team I had in mind.
this is a really good transfer team. And the fact that they kept Chucky O'Bannon, who was kind of, Mike Miles, Robin to Mike Miles Batman, I think is huge. Like, I actually think, despite losing their best player, they actually got better, which is hilarious to say. Avery Anderson's always, I think, been undervalued in his time at Oklahoma State. I know he can be a streaky player, but I think that when he has it going, he is such a dynamic guard and can do all the guard things super, super well. I'm interested to see who becomes the facilitator in that backcourt because I think, you're probably going to have Nelson be the guy who's scoring the ball, but it's interesting whether or not they're going to run Uday Nelson pick and rolls or if they're going to have Nelson play off ball as the scorer and kind of like try and run him through screens to get him off the dribble. That I think is really, really interesting. But in terms of like what they brought in, I'm like actually excited about TCU, and they made the tournament last year.
Yeah, and they were good in the tournament last year.
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah, I think Jameer Nelson like makes this team a legitimate threat. They were my dark horse. Like if anybody is going to kind of quote unquote emerge out of nowhere, I think it would be them because they're always tough to play. Like y'all said, they bring back all these guys: Chucky O'Bannon, Emmanuel Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Not who's the other one? Not Damian Ball. Why am I blanking? Micah Peavy. They bring back Micah Peavy, and even though they lost, what's his name, the big dude Lampkin. Even though they lost Lampkin, they brought in Ernest Uday, which is another huge transfer and like a big FU to Kansas. I can't believe he left Kansas because even though they brought in Hunter, they still need that front court depth behind him.
He didn't want to be depth; he wanted to be the guy.
Exactly.
It was a big bet on himself. I loved it.
Yeah, great work. And all those guys are super defensive oriented. I just worry about scoring more than I actually worry about the playmaking. The playmaking, I don't think will be as big of a thing. I think they'll be able to figure it out. Yeah, but if Jameer Nelson Jr. doesn't score like he scored at Delaware, then they're in some trouble. But I still think he will score. I've always liked his scoring package and his ability to be aggressive, shoot from three. Even when he's in slumps, he knows how to get out of them. Like he's going to do a ton of work. And I think he's a better playmaker than Mike Miles. That's the one thing that I never really liked about Mike Miles. I think he was always looking for his own shot, but it's part of what was going on in TCU. So look out for TCU. Definitely another team that nobody wants to play.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they brought back great depth in their front court, and it's going to kind of be on the backs of Anderson and Nelson of the offense that they can create. So another transfer guy. I mean, this transfer class, I just loved it. I mean, you guys, we touched at the beginning of Abe's and Shedrick for Texas, but also for Texas Tech. All these Texas teams brought in great transfers. Underrated guy, Darion Williams for Texas Tech, who was great for Nevada last year, kind of a do-it-all guard with good size. He's somebody who I really like, and I don't know what the team success is going to be for Texas Tech next year. They lost kind of two huge pieces, but I think he'll get touches, and I think he's a player that could really make an impact for a team that is kind of looking for a leader to take over. Either you have any word on Williams or got to dive into his film from Nevada?
I have not gotten to dive into the Texas Tech guys yet.
That's fair. Steve?
No, I mean, I'm familiar with Nevada, but being the New Mexico Lobo, that's my hometown, and seeing them there, I have nothing nice to say about the Wolfpack nor their backhanded, backstabbing guy of a coach. So don't ask me about anybody associated with Nevada.
All right, fair enough. We'll move on. We talked about we're still talking about transfers. I mean, West Virginia brought in a lot of transfers just because they kind of had to. I know, Julian, you like Edwards, but also they got Noah Farrakhan from Eastern Michigan. I don't know what you guys think of his game. A little inefficient scorer, but if he's going to have the green light again at a bigger school with some better talent around him, I don't know what that looks like.
I think I know what it looks like. And am hesitant
Good
to say
word.
4 for 20, but I think it looks like 4 for 20
Yeah.
or 5 for 18
Yeah.
or 6 for 25.
Yeah. I probably would agree with you there. I don't know what other offense there's going to be for them. I don't know if you had any positive words of encouragement for West Virginia next year, Steve.
Well, they have Kirk Risa, who was here. Again, I'm here in Tucson, Arizona. I'm an instructor at the University of Arizona, so I saw a lot of Kirk Risa there. He decided to stay after all of the stuff that happened with Bob Huggins. He's a great 3-point shooter, but beyond that, he doesn't really have much inside the 2-point arc game. Part of it is because here on campus, they had they had Ballo, they had Tabelis. Like that was he and Courtney Ramey's job. We're like, nope, you guys can't take 2-point shots. All you can do is space out the floor. So that's part of what it was. But he is also still a very good assist guy. Kirk Risa is. So get a bunch of assists, shoot a ton of threes. I just don't know what else he will bring to the table because he just hasn't been asked to do that much here. But fiery leader, if you saw him in the FIBA games, like he got in Luka Doncic's face a couple times for whining. He plays for Estonia, so you got to love the attitude. I'm sure West Virginia fans will love him just like we loved him here. But yeah, I think Texas Tech and West Virginia fans, I'll just have to say, I'm sorry for this year. It's going to be rough. It's going to take a while to stabilize.
Yeah, they definitely don't have a great outlook, but I think they'll still be an interesting team to watch. They'll have a good mix of talent. I don't know really what their outlook looks like. They'll probably be contending towards the bottom, unfortunately. But one last guy that I wanted to talk about, and then we'll probably wrap it up, is Tautis Makis for UCF is another guy that I think could pop in this conference prospect wise. I just like a lot what I saw from him, just kind of the, pass shoot, dribble, wing. That I think will be an interesting player, kind of just a dark horse sleeper guy. I don't know. Do you have any more sleeper guys draft wise, Steve?
The only one I can think of off the top of my head is Jizzle James, because Jizzle James is like a real legit scorer. He scored over 20 points per game his last 2 seasons down there in Florida. Was the MVP of one of the Nike EYBL circuits as well, scoring over 20 points per game again there as well. Not much of a passer right now. That's part of the thing that's still developing, but everything else you got to love about him. Attacking on defense, attacking on offense, comes from a great athletic family, if that's something you want to put in the profile, because his name is not Jizzle. His name is Edgerrin James Jr. For those of you that don't know, the son of Edgerrin James, the running back for the Colts for a very long time. So there's that in the profile. And that Cincinnati team needs somebody in the backcourt. Again, they have like CJ Frederick, they have Day Thomas, I think, like transfer guys coming over or been there, but they don't really stick out like that. I mean, Jizzle James is just the dude, and if you give him minutes, he's going to be able to step in there and light it up if you give him the green light, which I assume Cincinnati is going to give guys the green light until they figure out like who's the man on this offense.
Yeah, I like Ravon Griffith for them as well. He'll be interesting to watch. Kind of another scoring oriented guard for them. Just we'll give them a little bit more depth, and we'll see how their season turns out. Julian, any closing notes on the Big 12?
Yeah, I have one last guy that I want to bring up. Might be a little bit of a hometown talk here, but my guy Damian Dunn from Temple transferred over to Houston. And I think that's actually pretty exciting because he can kind of play that Marcus Sasser role as like next to they might run this weird 3-guard Monty lineup with Terrence Arsenault. I almost said Marcus Sasser, LJ Cryer, and Damian Dunn. And
Even
I
Jamal
think,
Shedd in there as well.
yeah, we're on 4 guards. Why not? They'll still only give up 55 points a game. But I do think like from a prospect perspective, it's actually interesting for Damian Dunn going to a school that's very defense oriented, because I think that's the part of his game he needs to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So, if he can have another good scoring season and play that Houston Cougars defense, I mean, why couldn't he play his way into a 2nd-round pick role at some point in the
I couldn't
future?
agree more. His jumper is electric, and when he had it going at the beginning of the year for Temple last year, it was pretty awesome.
Go Owls, baby.
Go Owls. Steve, closing notes on the Big 12.
Yves Messi. What are y'all's thoughts on Yves Messi? I just did a bunch of film work on Michael Nuoko, and those two were teammates together. I like both of them, but again, on this Baylor team, I'm like, I could buy Namir a little more than Yves Messi, only from the
I like the
standpoint of like, are
the
they going to?
guards more.
Yeah,
I definitely haven't dove as much into Missy as I'd like, but I don't know. I just feel like they have a lot of returning front court depth, and he probably won't see a ton of playing time.
because he's a name I keep hearing from like Rafael Barlow and like people associated with the Baylor program keep talking him up. But like you said, it's hard to see them being like, yeah, we'll sit Chama Chachua and we'll sit
Just haven't been doing it in the past.
Bridges.
I mean,
yeah. So
JTT has had injury issues in the past. So if there is a path, like unfortunately, I don't obviously you don't want much injury on anyone, but that's like probably the path to him playing is if like JTT gets hurt again.
Yeah,
who knows?
I mean, not the most optimistic outlook, but definitely a possibility. And definitely, if a scenario comes up in their front court depth, it'd be even just as a current piece their front court depth. I'll be curious to see, and I'll keep an eye out for him a little bit more as the season starts. Thank you for your time, Steve. Any work you'd like to plug? I know you were talking about your prospect podcast earlier. Anything coming up that you've been working on over at RezBall?
yeah, just look out for the podcast. You can search RezBall on any podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. Our most recent episode, again, is called the Matt Penny Special, where we look and dive into guys that weren't ranked in the top 50 in the RSCI and try and find one guy to highlight, which was Caden Cooper there, but there's a bunch of dudes along the way. Jizzle James, one of them, Michael Nwoko. We've mentioned some names here along the way. Go ahead and check that out. We release like 2 to 3 episodes just about every week. I also am a Pistons guy. I do work with Data Driven Piston Fan. We give a Pistons podcast every single week. So if you're down with Detroit basketball, you're down with being a draft sicko and obsessed like I am, tune into RezBall. We have a Substack, which we'll get going, but it's chilled for right now.
Yeah. I'll definitely make sure to link everything down in the description, and you guys
Appreciate
stuff. Check out all of Steve's work. He does a great job. Great basketball mind, and we love having you. Julian, till next time, we're off the clock.